Rome thought destruction was a verb you could finish. Burn the city, level the walls, fill in the harbor, salt the fields, the legend says, so nothing would ever grow there again. For 2,000 years, the historical record agreed with them. The Carthaginians were gone, extinguished, erased. The genome disagrees. In the last decade, ancient DNA pulled from Punic tombs has done something Rome never imagined possible. It has resurrected a population the Roman Senate, the Roman army, and 2 millennia of historians had all declared dead. And the answer it gave was stranger than the survival itself, because the people Rome destroyed were not who anyone thought they were. Start with the destruction itself, because the scale of it matters. It is the spring of 146 before the Common Era. The Third Punic War is in its final hours. Scipio Aemilianus, the Roman general, stands on a hill above the city of Carthage and watches it burn. The fire will last 6 straight days. Corpses will line the streets in numbers no Roman had seen before, and these were Romans who had seen everything. When it is over, the Senate will issue an order without precedent in the ancient world. Every wall standing must be pulled down. Every temple must be leveled. The harbor must be filled with rubble until ships can never enter again. The name itself will be forbidden. Polybius, the historian, was standing next to Scipio when the city collapsed. He wrote down what the general said in that moment. Scipio was weeping, and through the tears he was reciting Homer, the lines about the fall of Troy. A day will come when great Ilium shall perish, and Priam and his people. Scipio was not weeping for Carthage. He was weeping because he had just seen what the end of an empire looked like, and he knew Rome would have its turn. He was right about Rome, but he was wrong about Carthage. For 2,000 years afterward, the consensus held. The Carthaginians had been a colony of Phoenicians from Tyre on the coast of what is now Lebanon, sent west around 814 before the Common Era by a queen named Dido. They spoke a Phoenician language. They worshipped Phoenician gods, Baal Hammon and Tanit. They buried their dead in Phoenician ways. So historians did what historians do when the cultural evidence is overwhelming and the genetic evidence does not exist. They assumed the people themselves were Phoenician, biologically, ancestrally, in the blood. Levantines transplanted to North Africa, an enclave of Lebanese DNA on the southern Mediterranean shore. For all those centuries, nobody could test it. The bones of Carthage were burned in the destruction, buried under Roman colonial reconstruction, or dissolved by the warm, humid North African climate that turns ancient DNA into nothing within a few generations. Until the gardeners. In 1994, a maintenance crew was planting a tree in front of the National Museum of Carthage. The shovel struck stone. A small hole opened in the soil. They cleared it out and found a shaft, 4 meters deep, dropping into a sealed limestone crypt nobody knew was there. Inside the crypt, 2 stone sarcophagi. Inside one of them, a complete skeleton, undisturbed for roughly 2,500 years. The archaeologists called him Arik. He had died young, between 19 and 24. He had been buried in the late 6th century before the Common Era, 300 years before Rome ever marched on his city. He was placed in his tomb with an ivory box for ointments, an oil lamp, 2 trade amphora, and a small collection of amulets, the kind of burial a wealthy young Carthaginian got. Nothing about the grave was unusual. Everything about the skeleton was. The chamber, by accident of construction, had stayed dry. In a climate that destroys ancient DNA, this one room had preserved it. So the team from the University of Otago in New Zealand, led by the geneticist Lisa Matisu-Smith, did something that had never been done. They sequenced the first complete mitochondrial genome of an ancient Phoenician individual. His maternal lineage was a haplogroup called U5b2c1, one of the oldest, rarest, most distinctly European mitochondrial lineages on Earth. A signature carried by the hunter-gatherers of Mesolithic Europe, 10,000 years before Arike's birth. There is no plausible route by which that lineage walks itself out of the Levantine homeland of the Phoenicians, because it was never there to begin with. The young man buried on Byrsa Hill, at the heart of the Phoenician colony, was not Phoenician at the level of his maternal ancestry. He was European, likely Iberian, possibly from a Mediterranean island, and his family had probably been in Carthage for generations before he was born. One skeleton, one contradiction, the first crack in the story. To understand exactly how the rest of the Carthaginian population looked at the genetic level, and how that population reshapes everything we thought we knew about ancient empires, you have to look at the largest ancient DNA study of the Punic world ever attempted. If you want this kind of evidence delivered every week, the science the history books left out, subscribe. There is another one coming. The study landed in 2025. It was published in Nature, led by Ringbauer and a consortium of geneticists working across the Mediterranean. They did what Matthew Smith had done with one body, but with 210 of them, drawn from 14 Phoenician and Punic sites stretching from the Lebanese coast, where the Phoenicians began, all the way west to Carthage, Sicily, Sardinia, and Ibiza, the furthest edge of the Punic world. 210 ancient genomes, 14 sites, a coordinated genetic portrait of an empire that had been a name and a stack of stelae for 2,000 years. The result was something nobody in the field was prepared for. In the western colonies, Carthage, the Punic sites in Sicily, Sardinia, the Spanish coast, the Levantine genetic signal, the actual Phoenician ancestry from the Lebanese homeland, was almost completely absent. The Carthaginians of the classical period were not, in any meaningful biological sense, Phoenician. The dominant ancestry was a blend. Local North African populations of the Maghreb mixed heavily with Aegean components from the Greek world and the central Mediterranean. The Levantine fraction, the thing every history book treated as the foundation of Carthaginian identity, was a thin trace, sometimes invisible. The data also showed something else. Carthage was a cosmopolitan trading hub of intermarriage. The researchers found cases of close cousins whose ancestry traced to opposite ends of the Mediterranean. Couples where one parent was North African and the other was Sicilian. A genealogically continuous community that was, in genetic terms, a mosaic. The Carthaginian Empire was not an extension of Lebanon. It was a cultural project, a prestige system. The language was Phoenician. The gods were Phoenician. The burial rituals were Phoenician. But the people performing the language and the gods and the rituals were, almost all of them, locals and neighbors who had adopted the package. Carthage was an idea more than it was a bloodline, and Rome destroyed the idea. The bloodline was something else entirely. Stop and picture this for a moment. If you open a satellite map today and zoom in on the coast just north of Tunis, you can still see it. A perfect circle cut into the African shore, roughly 300 meters across. The Cothon, the military harbor of Carthage. 2,200 years after the Roman destruction, the outline is still there, embedded in the modern coastline, like a fingerprint pressed into wet clay. In its working years, the Cothon could hide more than 200 warships behind a screen of dry dock sheds, completely invisible from the sea. Roman envoys who visited Carthage before the final war described being escorted past it without ever realizing what they had walked next to. When Rome finally took the city, the Senate ordered the commercial harbor filled in. They could not fill in the Cothon. It was carved into bedrock, and it is still there. You are looking, on the map, at the negative space of an empire. Rome could not erase the shape of the thing it had destroyed, and the people inside that shape are still here too. A separate line of research, beginning with Pierre Zalloua and an international team in 2008, traced the paternal side of the equation, the Y-chromosome lineage of modern men around the Mediterranean. They found a specific signature, haplogroup J2, in combination with 6 particular YSTR haplotypes, a combination that maps onto the spread of Phoenician and Punic settlement. In modern coastal sites with ancient Phoenician contact, that signature appears in more than 6% of the male population. 6%, 2,500 years after Carthage burned. In coastal Tunisia, the regions closest to ancient Carthage carry frequencies of Levantine paternal markers measurably higher than the inland regions 100 kilometers away. The genetic geography still maps onto the imperial geography. In Sicily, in Palermo in the southwest, the same signature persists. In Sardinia, in Ibiza, where the maternal lineages largely turned over after the Roman conquest, but the male Y-chromosomes still carry the Phoenician marker. In Cádiz, on the Spanish Atlantic coast, where the Phoenicians founded Cádiz 3,000 years ago. In Malta, in Lebanon itself, where roughly 9 out of every 10 paternal lineages in modern men trace back, undeniably, to the Phoenicians of the Iron Age. Rome destroyed Carthage. They did not destroy the Carthaginians. They did not even know how to. There is something else this evidence quietly does. It rewrites the face of one of the most famous men in ancient history, Hannibal Barca, the general who terrified Rome for 16 years, who crossed the Alps with elephants, who won the largest tactical victory in classical warfare at Cannae and nearly broke the Roman Republic. Hannibal was, in the standard imagination, a Phoenician, a Levantine, a man who, if he were alive today, would look like a modern citizen of Beirut. The genetics says, probably not. Hannibal, given the actual ancestry composition of the Carthaginian elite of his time, almost certainly carried a blend of North African Berber ancestry, Sicilian and Central Mediterranean components, and only a thin trace of the Levantine lineage everyone assumed defined him. The most famous Carthaginian in history did not look the way history painted him. He looked like the Mediterranean he came from, because that is what Carthage actually was. And then there is the darkest accusation, the one Rome used, more than any other, to justify what it did. Of all the things Rome said about the Carthaginians, the worst was this, that they sacrificed their own children, burned them alive at a sanctuary called the Tofet, an open-air precinct of small urns, each one holding the cremated remains of an infant. The Tofet at Carthage held thousands of these urns. For 2,000 years, the accusation has stood as a central pillar of the Roman case against Punic civilization, the barbarians who killed their babies, a people the world was better off without. The trouble is, the bones themselves keep refusing to confirm the story. In 2010, a study in PLOS One looked at the skeletal ages inside the urns and concluded the distribution was consistent with natural infant mortality, not with ritual killing. The Tofet, in that reading, was an infant cemetery for a society with a brutal death rate. A year later, a rebuttal in the journal Antiquity looked at the same bones and argued the opposite. The debate has not closed. What the new DNA evidence quietly adds is this. The children in those urns were biologically part of the same diverse, locally rooted population we have just described. Not a foreign elite acting on imported rituals, not a separate caste. Whatever happened at the Tofet, sacrifice, mourning, mass infant burial, or some combination of all three, it happened among the most local of populations, which means that whichever side of the debate eventually wins, the version Rome sold the world is too simple to survive contact with the bones. Scipio Aemilianus stood on that hill in 146 BCE and recited Homer. He was weeping for Troy because he understood, instinctively, that great cities fall. He was right that Rome would have its day in 476. But he was watching the wrong thing. He thought he was watching a population die. He was watching a city die. The two are not the same. The Carthaginians had been a coalition long before he arrived, and they remained a coalition after he left. They were already in Sicily. They were already in Sardinia. They were already in Spain and the Balearics and the coast of his own Italy. He could burn the harbor. He could level the walls. He could even, supposedly, salt the fields, though that part, archaeology has quietly suggested, was probably invented by a 19th century writer who wanted the story to feel more total. What he could not do, what Rome could not do, what no empire has ever been able to do, was reach into the genome of a Mediterranean people and take it out. 2,070 years later, the Carthaginians are still here. They are in Tunis. They are in Sicily. They are in Sardinia and Ibiza and Cádiz and Malta. They are in the haplogroup of every 16th or 17th man who walks past you on a street in the old Punic world. They are in the negative space of the Cothon, still visible from orbit. They are in the bones of a young man on Byrsa Hill, whose mother's people had been European for 10,000 years before he was even born. They are in Hannibal's actual face, which we have spent 2 millennia painting wrong. Rome thought destruction was a verb you could finish. The genome has been quietly disagreeing the whole time. If you want to keep following this, the DNA evidence the history books left out, and what it does to the version of the past we were taught, subscribe. Next week, we cross the Mediterranean north to the people Carthage signed treaties with in gold leaf, the people Rome swallowed before it ever swallowed Carthage, the Etruscans. Their DNA has just settled a question Herodotus got wrong 2,500 years ago, and the answer is not the one anyone in classical history saw coming.